Hello, I'm Jackie, welcome back to my channel, and for today I read Ship It by Britta Lundin. This book is rather polarizing. There was a very particular set of circumstances that led me to reading this book. This book was published in 2018 by Britta Lundin, who happens to be a Supernatural fangirl. I don't know if you've noticed, but the show Supernatural on the CW has ended recently, and Tumblr, which has been dormant for a very long time, went insane. I stopped watching Supernatural in high school when I realized it was going to be a very slow decline, and they honestly should have killed it long before now, in my opinion. So Britta Lundin is now a writer on Riverdale, another CW show that has gotten infamous. I'm particularly a fan of this scene. Context does not make it better. So many years ago, there was a scandal in the Supernatural fandom in which one of the lead actors, Jensen Ackles, was at a convention and a fan asked him about bisexual subtext in the show, and he responded with essentially, "Get out of here with your question, I'm not going to answer that." He was clearly very uncomfortable with it, and there were rumors that the teenage girl who'd asked the question were crying later. This writer saw this incident and went, "I can write a book about that." So the premise of this book is that a 16-year-old girl named Claire is a massive fan of this show called Demon Heart, which is essentially Supernatural with a very thin coat of paint brushed over it. And she ships the two main characters, which are called Smokey and Heart. Heart is a demon, Smokey is a demon hunter. She's convinced that they are deeply in love and need to make out. So she convinces her mother to take her to a Demon Heart convention in Boise, Idaho, and she asks essentially the same question as was asked to Jensen Ackles: is there subtext in the show? And the actor, whose name is Forrest, responds with, "You're crazy," and she cries. The PR team decides that this is a massive issue and they need to take Claire on them on this massive convention tour and convince the fans that they are not homophobic. And of course they have to bring her mother too because she's a minor. I don't know where they got the money for this. They even stage a fake raffle to make it look like she won it in a prize, and she has to live blog this whole thing because of course she's Tumblr famous. Now I will say I did not hate this book. I was surprised. I think there were definitely some redeeming qualities. I did find an interview online from Britta Lundin saying that the writing of the book did change dramatically when she was hired to be a writer on Riverdale, and I can definitely see this. This book is written in dual POV, where we've got half the story from Claire's perspective and half the story from Forrest's perspective. And it's actually very interesting because Forrest's sections really go into how a television show is made, how the decisions are made for what's going to happen in the show. He feels like he's not really qualified for any of it, and it's incredibly overwhelming, and he really has a strong imposter syndrome. A good section of the book is him developing a relationship with his co-star Rico, who plays the Demon Heart, because Rico has been in the business for a really long time, and he kind of mentors Forrest, teaching him how to be a good actor, how to survive the industry, be charismatic on social media. He's Misha Collins, we all know he's Misha Collins, who plays Castiel on Supernatural. In fact, the most touching moment in the book for me personally was Forrest remembering a time when they were shooting a scene in some snowy woods and he was shivering, and Rico noticed that he was cold and asked the staff to get him some warmer clothes, and how actors don't get a lot of chances to be demanding on set without being labeled as difficult to work with, and how incredibly grateful he is that Rico used one of his, difficult passes in order to make sure that he was okay. And in fact, it's even hinted that this is the gay subtext that Claire is picking up on, is just this deep sense of gratitude and mentorship. Oh, Claire. I'm just gonna read from the book. So coming out of the gate, Claire has some real not like other girls energy. So Claire's from a town called Pine Bluff, Idaho, and this is her description of it. "Why don't I have friends in Pine Bluff? Maybe they don't like me because I'm a city kid. Pine Bluff, with all of its 4,000 people, is actually considered a city by people who live 20 miles into the country. Or maybe it's because I only moved here 5 years ago and wasn't born and bred in Pine Bluff. But probably they don't like me because they expect me to be obsessed with country music and elk hunting and prom instead of a dumb TV show about demons in which two lead male characters are not yet, but should totally be, dating. This is not exactly unusual in YA literature. I can power through this. But then she is mean to her parents. One thing about your parents being artists is that they are always home, which would be fine if they weren't incredibly interested in my life at all times. Everything's fine, just another day in Pine Bluff, I say on my way upstairs. It's eggplant pizzas in an hour, Mom calls after me. Groan. I knew it'd be something off the internet. There better be bread in that, I say, halfway up. No, the eggplant is the bread, isn't that great, she hollers. No, it's not. We'll talk more at dinner, Dad says. God, my parents are so annoying with all their caring. This is not the way to make me care about a protagonist. Keep in mind, this is chapter 2. Mean to the people in her town, she's incredibly judgmental, she's obsessed with this ship-going canon. You know, I actually saw a very interesting video from The Take about shipping recently, and how we mentally play things out before we do it. Life is essentially reciting what you're going to say on the telephone, and shipping is a great way to essentially rehearse for relationships, which is all good and fine, but they also point out that when ships don't go canon, and you've become so incredibly invested in this relationship, it can be like getting turned down. And these shippers can almost get, you know, nice guys, capital N, capital G, about their fictional ship and take it out on the creators. And Claire definitely fits in that category. So, after Claire wins this raffle and she's in the tour bus and she's hanging out with the stars, everyone wants Forrest to talk to Claire, but he's understandably rebuffed by her being incredibly rude and mean to him. Claire is just so determined for this ship to be canon that her plan is to harass the writer on the show named Jamie. Now, Jamie is, you know, the one who created Demon Heart, and she is convinced that he is queer-baiting the audience with lots of little hints. You know, it's essentially supernatural, remember. There's references to boyfriends, there's references to, you know, emotional tension between Smokey and Hart. She's convinced that he's writing it in with the intention of making it canon, and she just needs to talk to him and tell him that this is the direction that his show needs to go. Great plan. Excellent. So when Claire is first at her convention, she meets Tess. Tess is a fan artist who is following these conventions around in her car and seems to be romantically interested in Claire. Now, Claire is not sure about her sexuality at the beginning of the book. She doesn't feel straight, but she doesn't feel gay. Her mom is very open and accepting. There's a point in the story when they're driving to the convention and her mom's like, do you want to tell me anything? Because you're really into gay fan fiction for a straight person. And she's like, ew, Mom, why would you think that? Ugh. And her mom is like, okay. And so Tess is interested in her. They meet again at another convention. They do a little bit more flirting. Tess asks Claire out on a date to a restaurant. Claire accepts, but she's starting to feel feelings towards ladies. So good for you, Claire. Everybody had a feeling you were into ladies with how intensely you cared about this gay ship and how much you cared about gay representation for a straight person. Oh yeah, part of this I did forget, Claire is so incredibly mad at Tess for having figured out her sexuality of all things. Tess very openly admits that she is homoromantic pansexual, so she only feels romantic feelings towards women, but she is sexually attracted to everybody. And Claire is very pissed off that she knows herself this well. And after she tells Forrest about this in an effort to make him understand the LGBT community a little better and make him a little bit more open to them being fans of the show, she responds by refusing to talk to her like a child. But Tess has a very different perspective on this ship going canon. Tess is of the opinion that fanfiction should stay in fanfiction land and canon can be in canon land, and this is her rationale. Maybe because I'm used to it, she cuts back. Maybe it's because I grew up seeing white people on my television. It's not like a showrunner can decide one day that a character's not white anymore, so I got used to the world being fair, okay? I stopped caring about what the showrunner thinks because a character can be anything in fic. They can be black or queer or fat or whatever I want, and I don't need anyone's permission. So just ship what you want to ship and stop caring about what Jamie and Forrest think. But you're wrong, I kind of yell. This should have been a moment in the book where Claire reflects on herself and realizes that she has a lot of privilege in the fact that she has been able to see a lot of television characters like her. And this is a discussion they have in the book about how one reason fanfiction is so popular is that there's a lack of diversity in major television, and fanfiction helps remedy that. Claire mentions that the first character she ever got really invested in is the reporter from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, because she was the only female character on the show. And I can definitely relate to that, where it's like, there's no girls, well, I'm just gonna create elaborate backstories for the 2 female characters that actually talk. Like, we're at the point where we're finally getting some good female straight representation, gay representation, not to mention every single group of people of color finally getting to see themselves in media. There's a line, Claire! You don't get to skip to the front of the line because you feel like you need to harass a showrunner. So later in the story, Tess and Claire are out for sushi. They happen to be in Tess's hometown, and walking by the table is a group of Tess's friends. Now earlier, Tess and Claire had discussed how Tess's friends don't know that she's a fangirl and that she's living out of her car so she can go to all these Demon Heart conventions, and she draws dirty fan art. And she just generally doesn't want her friends to know this part of her life. She doesn't think they'd understand, and if Claire could please not mention that to them. Now, Claire is pretty okay with this until she sees Tess's friends, and this is how she describes them. These are not Tumblr people. These are Instagram people. Andrea Garcia people. Popular. How didn't I see it before? This is why Tess doesn't understand me. She's not a supervillain, she's just got some friends who are skinny and like to go to the mall. Can we get over this whole popular versus nerd girl dichotomy already? So rather than just respect the fact that Tess doesn't want to tell her friends, Claire decides that she's immediately, with very little thought, going to just out her to her friends about being a fangirl. Claire immediately spills the beans and tells the friends that Tess is a massive fangirl for the show called Demon Heart. Tess is understandably pissed off, drags Claire outside to talk about what the frick just happened. So Tess's argument is essentially, hey, I told you not to do that and you immediately did it. And Claire's argument is, well, if your friends were really your friends, they would just respect the fact that you're a fangirl. And Tess is like, but I also specifically told you not to tell them that. And as this argument's going on, Claire's mom is walking along the background, kind of realizing she should probably just go right back inside. Tess turns to her mom and says, your daughter's gay. Walks out. I certainly think Tess was out of line, and I definitely think that was a bit of an overkill response to what Claire did, but Claire is also a really crappy human, and also you guys should not be a couple if your relationship so far has been talking about fanfiction and stabbing each other mutually in the back. Why am I rooting for you as a couple? And also, this was the point where I just sat down and went, okay, everything else in this book I can excuse because Claire is a teenager. But I would never have done this at 16. I would never have had a friend tell me specifically not to do something and then immediately broken that promise. Why do you think you know what's good for Tess when you've known her for a week? And also there's a factor here where Tess is the only African-American girl in the friend group and she's already worried about being different and ostracized enough without also drawing dirty fan art being something everybody at school knows. So now that we're past that drama, it's time to get to the finale. So throughout this whole book, Tess has been trying in vain to get Jamie alone, whether it's because of circumstances or just because she's sitting outside his hotel room every single night because he's gonna have to talk to her eventually, and then falls asleep, and then Jamie just steps over her unconscious form in order to get into the hotel room. Just normal girly things. And eventually what happens is the publicist named Kathy turns out that they are mutuals on Tumblr, and she is a big fan of this 16-year-old Tumblr blogger. To the point where Kathy gives her Jamie's Twitter password. And Claire decides the best course of action is to load up his Twitter queue with essentially blackmail items and tells Jamie either you talk to me or I start tweeting. This is our hero for the book. Oh, there's actually something I forgot. So, for no reason that I can figure out, Claire decides that she wants to write real person fic about Forrest and Rico, not the characters they play on the show, but them as human beings. Because as the show goes on and they start to kind of realize where each other are coming from, they actually do develop a bit of a tepid friendship. To the point where, Claire knows his, Dairy Queen order and how he feels that Rico is a mentor figure and all this other stuff. So she writes this whole scene where it's Forrest's birthday and Rico gives him his Dairy Queen order, and then they have sex. And that part's cut from the book, but you can tell that that's what happened. So Forrest decides to go to Dairy Queen for real, a bunch of teenage girls are giggling about his order, and then he goes home and realizes, oh, someone wrote porn about me and my co-star. He justifiably goes to Claire and is just like, what the frickin' heck do you think you're doing? And she says, well, it's representation. It's, you know, whatever. So this is Forrest's point of view. Everyone knows it's not real, she says. Do they? Because I'm not sure you know. Kariko and I aren't in love, Claire. We're not secretly having sex. We're not making out after hours. We're not gay. She shakes her head at me and curls her lip. You're such a homophobe. You won't even admit it. No, I'm just straight. There's a difference. If this was about you and some hot female co-star, you wouldn't even give it a second thought, she spits at me. This is entirely about your own internalized bullshit. Yell, get over it. You wrote porn about me! They're just dicks, you dick, she shouts, throwing up her hands and grasping at the back of her head. Yeah, this is the iconic line that people keep pointing out. They're just dicks, you dick. That's not the point! And that's one thing I really hate about this, is the fact that Claire can't figure out that just because someone is uncomfortable with someone writing porn about them doesn't make them homophobic. This book makes me angry. So in the finale, she confronts Jamie in a conference room. So yeah, he admits that he ends up queer baiting, and Jamie realizes that these shippers are utterly insane, and comes to the conclusion that Forrest's character needs to die. He was planning to die in the finale anyway, but they were thinking there would be a way to bring him back for the next season, have him be resurrected, you know, a la Jon Snow. And they basically say that's cancelled, cut out, Forrest, you're fired. Forrest is understandably very pissed at Claire. Claire realizes that she actually caused the death of one of her favorite characters by being so intent on making this canon, and actually comes to the realization she needs to work on herself for a little bit. And actually grows off screen, but we don't really see that. There's just a time jump of her becoming a better person. She ends up apologizing to Tess, they get back together, despite the fact I think they should not have. And Forrest actually manages to get another television show on the network. Their whole book, he's trying to end up being a video game movie, and there's even a line about how Claire's like, oh, I hope you have the fans you finally actually want. And I'm like, he's a man in his 20s. Of course he'd rather hang out with video game people for a video game that he loves. Like, what do you want about? Of course he doesn't want to hang out with 14-year-old girls when he's a man in his mid-20s. Well, it'd be weird if he was. But he loses that role because Forrest comes to the conclusion that the fans deserve a little fan service, and he actually kisses Rico at a press conference. I kind of knew this was coming. I wasn't too mad about it. I get mad in general when really nice platonic relationships end up being sexual in order just to fulfill the need for a romance storyline in stories, so I was a little annoyed, but at the same time, they end up being friends after the kiss. It's not like he and Rico get together. They kind of realize, yeah, you can kiss your friends once or twice and just stay friends. Forrest ends up dating Kathy, the publicist with the Tumblr. But yeah, so it does end happily. Forrest gets another job for a show that's a little bit better. Rico continues to play Smokey on Demon Heart. And yeah, Claire and Tess get back together. Happily ever after. I don't think I would read anything else from this author if she ever came out with anything else. But go ahead and subscribe to me. You'll probably see more videos like this. I cannot resist bad YA books. And if you're here for that, go ahead and subscribe. Alright, bye!